In the last video I mentioned I thought I'd maybe try and clean up some of these curves, and I think these types of little blips in the curve is something that I don't want. Oftentimes, as I said, when you see this kind of abrupt reversal in a curve in the graph editor, it can signal that there's probably a problem. I mean, unless the animation is specifically made to do that, but this really isn't. So in this one, I feel like I'm not sure if it's reversing the movement here in the y-axis. I guess it is. This is the y-axis, right? This is our y location. And it does look like it's reversing it slightly in the y-axis. And I don't think we want to do that. I think we want to continue that curve on. So let's take a look at this. Usually what I find is that I can just delete these and it works pretty well. So let's try this. I'm going to hit the X key and delete the keyframe here. And that gives me a little bit more of a curve there. Now let's take a look at what's happening here. It's moving back in the Y, and it continues to move back so that the leg breaks here. And we don't want that. But I also don't want to move this back toward the front of the character to try and fix that, because that will just add another keyframe. So we should probably think about dealing with the torso. So let's take a look at what's happening here with the torso in these curves. So here we are at frame 5, and this is the up position. So we want our character to be up at its highest point at this point in time, but does it need to be this high? So let's see if we can move this down just a hair. I'll press G and Z and just move them down just a little bit, and then click, and that moves this keyframe down a hair. Now, will we need to do that also at frame 11? Let's take a look there. Here's our passing pose at frame 11. Let's take a look at the right foot. Come up here. Here's our problem keyframe. Let's delete that. That, yes, pushes it back, so it's a little broken there. So we could go back and take a look at that keyframe for the torso again. I still need to move this down a hair. G and Z and move it down a bit so the leg doesn't break. Let's take a look. Let's go back to the graph for the foot and take a look at what happened here. We've also got this keyframe here. Do we need that? Can we have this curve go smoothly from one to the other without this keyframe? I'm not sure. Let's take a look. Let's delete it. And then we could actually hit V and free that handle and use that handle to give us a curve much like we had before. Like that. That's possible. We could try that. Let's go back to frame 5, and I'll choose the left foot, and here we are at the same type of keyframe. I could delete this, hit V for this keyframe to free the handle, and use the handle to create the curve so it's more smooth. That's a possibility too. So it's one of those things where you need to go through, I think, and try and smooth out your curves, usually by deleting keyframes. Let me go through and see what else we have here. This one down here, let's take a look at this. What is this for? And let's delete this keyframe and see what happens. Oh, this is the rotation. This isn't the movement, this is the rotation. So that's fine. We can get rid of that rotation. It doesn't need to flop or rotate back and forth there. That's fine. Let's go ahead and do that. What else can we find here? This one here, what does this do? This is also a rotation. Let's see what happens when we delete this guy. All right, now let's take a look at this. Okay, that was the rotation back and forth of that foot, so we really don't need that. That's just going to add to the floppiness there of the feet. Let's take a look at this foot and see if there's a problem or anything we can do in terms of rotation here as well. What do you see here? See any problems? It's not looking too bad here. There's little blips here. What is this? Let's move our cursor to that point. What is that? That's a rotation. We could probably do without these two keyframes. We really don't need the rotation of that. Well, let's see. I'm just going to delete the two and see what happens. Yeah. That's okay. I can live without that. What else might cause us a little bit of a glitch here? It's actually not looking too bad. So I think I'm okay with this. Let's take a look at the run cycle and just let it play and see what we can see here. I'm just going to hit play and let's let it run. I'm also going to reduce the frame range back down to 12 because, as we said, our extra keyframe at frame 13 is really there just to allow it to repeat smoothly. So we don't need that as part of the actual run cycle. I think there's more that we could do with the arms and a little bit of follow through with the hammer and the shield. But for right now, I think I'm pretty good with this. I think I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And the next thing is the jump animation. And I'm not really going to do an animation per se. I'm just going to do a still pose that we can use just to have him have a pose for when he jumps. Just kind of a dynamic pose. When he lifts off the ground, he's in that pose, and when he hits the ground, he comes out of that pose. And that's it. So it'll just be a one pose jump animation, I guess. So for this, we could really put it anywhere. Right now, we've got our run animation here from 1 to 12. And we've got our idle animation going clear out to frame 81. So we could set up our jump pose out here at frame 100, I guess. Let's just do that. So I'm going to come out here. I'm going to select everything with the A key so I can see the keyframes down here in the timeline. And I'll come out here to frame 100. And I'll make my start 95, and I'll make my end 105. Why not? And I'll hit the home key on the keyboard to zoom into that frame range. So here we are. Also, what I want to do, I think, is bring that default pose back out here. So we begin with the default pose. I'm going to come in here and go to this frame. Oh, let's go to frame 0 here and select all of those keyframes all the way down. And I'm just going to duplicate those and move those out to frame 100. So I'm going to move my cursor out to 100. And then I'll just come back and press Shift D and move that entire thing out to frame 100. Oh, I don't need it to be at 100. I'll move it to 95 here. There we go. Now let's take a look at how we can arrange him to make him kind of look cool as he jumps. Now, one thing to realize is that this center torso control shouldn't go up or down. Even though this is a jump pose, we're not going to move the character up or down at all. We're just going to change the position of the legs, the arms, and the head. We'll create the lift up off the ground in the game engine through coding. So we just want to change the pose and not the position. So let's see what we can do here. I think, first of all, I'm going to work on the feet and get them in a position that's kind of what I want here. Let me go to the side view, and I think I want one foot up and the other down and kind of the toe pointed. So I'm just going to take this foot and move it up a bit, maybe like that, and maybe roll that down a bit like that. I think I should probably turn on the manipulators here and go to global for now. And I'm going to lift that straight up like that maybe. And for this, I can maybe rotate this down and move this up a bit. So he's kind of like that. Maybe as he jumps, he looks down a bit because he's looking down to where he's going to land. And maybe when he jumps, he kind of lifts his arms up. Let's see what we can do with that. So maybe I'll bring this in, maybe rotate this a bit, maybe bring it up a bit. Let's see what we can do here. Rotate that. Something like that. I think it needs a little more tweaking, but you know, something like this, where the arms go up and they're kind of up as he comes down. Something like this. All right, so there's that arm, let's say. Let's see what we can do with the other arm. I'll kind of do the same thing and move it up. I don't think it'll be as much this time. I think maybe something like that doesn't look too bad. Have him hanging onto the shield like this. Maybe we can lift the shoulders up a bit. Let's try that. All right, so I think I'm going to go with something like this. This will just give us a pose to use as he lifts off the ground. And it's nothing special here at all. I just want to have something for us that we can use when we take this into Unity and begin setting up the character controller. All right, well, let's go with that. We now have our poses or our animation cycles for our idle, our jump, and our run. And these are, of course, the very basic animations for a game character. There can be a lot more. But to keep things pretty straightforward, I think I'm just going to go with these 3 animations. And these are what we'll then take into Unity, create the animation clips in Unity, and then set up our character controller so that we can actually control the character in-game using keyboard controls. So in the next video, we'll start working on that. So stay tuned, and I'll see you then.